Hello, this is Rosario Aurelius, and welcome to Atana, where poetry and magic meet. Today I will be talking a little bit about the archetype of the philosopher king, the fool, the mercurial aspects of the poet, and the magic of poetry. Mercury is about communication and miscommunication, wordplay, language, and ciphers of the shaman poets. If you've ever heard people talk about a Mercury retrograde, it signals a time to communicate with oneself. The gods of the planet Mercury include Mercury, Odin, Loki, Hermes, Thoth, or Tahuti, and are all associated with alchemy, most commonly understood as the art of transforming base metals into gold. Today I'll look at the writings of Percy Shelley, William Shakespeare, and Sir Edward Kelley. Percy Shelley, born 1792 and died in 1822, was an English romantic poet whose work ranged from joyous ecstasy to brooding sorrow. His trademark were subjects like love, sorrow, hope, nature, and politics. He also wrote essays on poetry as a method or practice of alchemy in Victorian England. Last week I cited Aleister Crowley's focus on the rites of Eleusis, using poetry written on the classical planets to develop the highest qualities in humanity. Shelley's essay, A Defense of Poetry, written in 1821, also addressed the alchemical attributes of poetry, in which he stated, "Poetry turns all things to loveliness. It exalts the beauty of that which is most beautiful. It adds beauty to that which is most deformed. It marries exultation and horror, grief and pleasure, eternity and change. It subdues to union under its light yoke all irreconcilable things." So poetry for Shelley was used to mediate and raise awareness for the need of radical change. Now on to Shakespeare. William Shakespeare, born 1564 and died 1616, was a Renaissance English poet who is still surrounded by wide-ranging controversy through his connections with other Elizabethan poets and members of Elizabethan court. He was in communication with Queen Elizabeth's court astrologer John Dee, a famed magician whose work with ciphers and Enochian magic is still widely used today. He was also involved in sacred geometry, especially of theaters such as the Globe, where Shakespeare's plays were performed. Many of Shakespeare's works are considered thinly veiled ciphers themselves. He wrote a number of sonnets and plays that are still performed and studied today. John Dee, born 1567 and died in 1609, and Edward Kelley, born 1555 and died in 1595, worked together in a series of angelic magical rituals where they received the language and the keys for what would become Enochian magic. Vincent Bridges presents an excellent lecture on the relationships between Dee, Kelley, and Shakespeare, found on YouTube, all included in the links below. Their works were also heavily steeped in alchemy, as it was one of the primary sciences of the Renaissance period. Dee is fondly remembered in Western Europe, and Kelley in Eastern Europe for the contributions of each toward the history of alchemy. Today I will be reading Shelley's Ozymandias, an excerpt from Shakespeare's King Lear, and Kelley's Concerning the Philosopher's Stone. King Lear dramatizes the story of an aged king of ancient Britain whose plan to divide his kingdom among his 3 daughters ends tragically. When he tests each by asking how much she loves him, the older daughters flatter him, the youngest does not, and Lear disowns and banishes her. She marries the King of France, then the older daughters turn on Lear, leaving him to wander madly in a furious storm. Vincent Bridges also relates that King Lear was based on the history of Prague, where the forsaken daughter founds a golden city. This is one of many connections between Dee, Kelley, and Shakespeare. Also of note, Teresa Burns wrote an excellent synopsis of the poem by Edward Kelley, all included also in the links below. So, without further ado, Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. An excerpt from King Lear. Let me hire him too, said the fool to Kent. Here's my coxcomb. King Lear. How now, my pretty knave, how dost thou? And the fool said to Kent, Sirrah, you were best, take my coxcomb. And Lear said, Why, my boy? And the fool replied, Why, for taking one's part that's out of favor. And the fool said to Kent, Nay, and thou canst not smile as the wind sits, thou'lt catch cold shortly. There, take my coxcomb. Why, this fellow has banished 2 on's daughters, and did a 3rd a blessing against his will. If thou follow him, thou must needs wear my coxcomb. How now, nuncle? Would I had 2 coxcombs and 2 daughters. And then Lear said, Why, my boy? And the fool said, I gave them all my living, I'd keep my coxcombs myself. There's mine, beg another of thy daughters. And Lear said, Take heed, Sirrah, the whip. And then the fool said, Truth's a dog must a kennel. He must be whipped out when Lady Brock may stand by the fire and stink. And then Lear said, A pestilent gall to me. And then the fool said, Sirrah, I'll teach thee a speech. And Lear said, Do. Then the fool said, Mark it, nuncle. Have more than thou showest, speak less than thou knowest. Lend less than thou owest, ride more than thou goest, learn more than thou trowest, set less than thou throwest, leave thy drink and thy whore, and keep in a door, and thou shalt have more than 2 tens to a score. And then Kent said, This is nothing, fool. And then the fool said, Then 'tis like the breath of an unfeed lawyer. You gave me nothing for it. Can you make no use of nothing, nuncle? And then Lear said, Why no, boy, nothing can be made out of nothing. And then the fool said to Kent, Prithee tell him so much the rent of this land comes to, he will not believe a fool. And then Lear said, A bitter fool. And then the fool said, Dost thou know the difference, my boy, between a bitter fool and a sweet one? And then Lear said, No, lad, teach me. The fool said, that lord that counselled thee to give away thy land, come place him here by me, do thou for him stand. The sweet and bitter fool will presently appear, the one in motley here, the other found out there. Then Lear said, Dost thou call me fool, boy? And then the fool said, All thy other titles thou hast given away, that thou wast born with. And then Kent said, This is not altogether fool, my lord. And then the fool said, No, faith, lords and great men will not let me. If I had a monopoly out, they would not have part on it. And ladies, too, they will not let me have all the fool. To myself they'll be snatching. Nuncle, give me an egg, and I'll give thee 2 crowns. And then Lear said, What 2 crowns shall they be? And then the fool said, Why, after I have cut the egg in the middle, and eat up the meat, the 2 crowns of the egg. When thou clovest thy crown in the middle, and gavest away both parts, thou borest thine ass on thy back o'er the dirt. Thou hast little wit in thy bald crown, when thou gavest thy golden one away. If I speak like myself in this, let him be whipped that first finds it so. And then the fool sings a song. Fools had ne'er less grace in a year, for wise men are grown foppish, and know not how their wits to wear, their manners are so apish. And then Lear said, When were you wont to be so full of psalms, sirrah? And then the fool said, I have used it, nuncle, ever since thou madest thy daughters thy mothers, for when thou gavest them the rod and puttest down thine own breeches. And he continues to sing. Then they for sudden joy did weep, and I for sorrow sung, that such a king should play bo peep, and go the fools among. Prithee, nuncle, keep a schoolmaster that can teach thy fool to lie. I would fain learn to lie. And then Lear said, And you lie, sirrah, will have you whipped. And then the fool said, I marvel what kin thou and thy daughters are. They'll have me whipped for speaking true. Thou'lt have me whipped for lying, and sometimes I am whipped for holding my peace. I had rather be any kind of thing than a fool, and yet I would not be thee, nuncle. Thou hast pared thy wit of both sides, and left nothing in the middle. Here comes one of the pairings. Concerning the Philosopher's Stone. The heavenly cope in him nature's sour, too hidden, but the rest to sight appear, wherein the sperms of all the bodies lower most secret are, yet spring forth one a year. And as the earth with water authors are, so of his part is dryness end of care. No flood so great as that which floweth still, nothing more fixed than earth digested thrice, no wind so fresh as when it serveth will, no profit more than keep in and be wise, no better hap than dry up air to dust, for then thou mayest leave, and of sleep thy lust. Yet I will warn thee, lest thou chance to fail. Sublime thine earth with stinking water erst, then in a place where Phoebus' lonely tale is seen at midday, see thou mingle best. For nothing shineth that doth want his light, for doublet beams, unless it be first bright. Let no man lead unless he know the way, that wise men teach, or a drop leadeth in, whereof the first is large and easiest prey, the other hard and mean but to begin. For surely these and no more is found, wherein Apollo will his harp strings sound. Example learn of God that placed the skies, reflecting virtues from every point, in which the mover wherein all things lies, doth hold the virtues of all every joint. And therefore essence sift may well be said, containing all and yet himself a maid. Remember also how the gods began, and by descent who was to each the sire. Then learnt the lives and kingdoms if you can, their manners eke with all their whole attire. Which if thou do, and know to what effect, the learned sophists will thee not reject. If this my doctrine bend with thy brain, then say I nothing, though I said too much. Of truth 'tis good will moved me, not gain, to write these lines. Yet I write not to such as catch at crabs when better fruits appear, and want to choose at fittest time of year. Thou mayest, my friend, say, what is this for lore? I answer, such as ancient physic taught. And thou read 1,000 books before, yet in respect of this they teach thee not. Thou mayest likewise be blind and call me fool, yet shall these rules forever praise their school. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any recommendations for future readings, please leave a message in the comments section below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.